Give them out at the bottom. Halacha base. Easier Gemara than yesterday. Okay? I don't write them, as you know. I only say them over.
I went through the Mishnah on the actual Mishnah on Shavuos.
Yeah.
It starts right in. Doesn't have all this.
Where it starts right in.
Must be understood. This is book one, right? It's not talking about the woman's
Shavuos? You're looking in the wrong place. What woman stuff?
the consumer.
That's Ksuvas, not Shavuos.
No, this is
That's Ksuvas, not Shavuos.
no, this is definitely
No women's Ksuva here. Sorry. I mean, at least not that anywhere that I can ascertain. Call double dare. Call him halacha base. Call sheyesh v'yediyah. V'tchila v'yediyah v'sof. Now, the korban we're talking about, the korban which is brought for a shvuah, for an improper shvuah, although we're not going to talk about that tonight, really, but it's the same korban. The korban brought for an improper oath, or for several other reasons, including entering the Beis HaMikdash tamei or eating a korban when one is tamei, is the same korban. And it's called korban olav yored, meaning it's called a korban which goes up and down. Remember that term, Mr. Zuber. Korban olav yored. It goes up and down. Why is it called go up and down? Bottom line, right? Because in fact, what kind of korban you bring depends on your tax bracket. If you're a high tax bracket, you bring a more expensive korban. Low tax bracket, you bring a less expensive korban. Okay, so this korban olav yored is brought for tumas mikdash and tumas kachim. If you enter Beis Hamikdash when you're tamei, or if you ate kachim when you're tamei, but it's only if you did it without awareness. However, this is unlike any other prohibition in the Torah, in that in order to bring this korban, you must have known you were tamei before entering the Beis Hamikdash, or having eaten the korban and forgotten. That's important. You have to have yediyah, awareness beforehand. Halim, then forgetfulness, then yediyah basof, then awareness again. Okay? So kol sheish bo yediyah b'tchila, there's awareness at the beginning, yediyah basof, awareness at the end, halim ben asayim, and you forgot in the middle, harei zeba olav yored, you bring this korban olav yored, turning Talmud base. Yesh bo yediyah b'tchila ve'em bo yediyah basof. What if you were aware that you were tamei before entering the Beis Hamikdash or before eating the Kodesh, but then you did not become aware subsequently? In other words, you remained ignorant for the rest of your life that you had become that you were tamei and did enter Beis Hamikdash kachim. So then soya nasa bifnim, the goat which is made inside the Beis Hamikdash, as opposed to the goat which is sent la azazel on Yom Kippur, tole it suspends suspends any penalty to him, any punishment at the hands of heaven, until he gets around to until he becomes aware of this matter, and then when he becomes aware of it, he brings the korban olav yored. Okay, so you must have yediyah b'tchila, yediyah helim b'emtza, yediyah b'sof. Awareness beforehand, forgetfulness when you enter the mikdash or at the kodesh, and then awareness at the end. I mean, not only yediyah b'tchila v'v'soif, helim b'asayim. However, that there is, you have to know beforehand, know afterwards, and forget in the middle. Talmud both says v'nelam shtei poim. It says nelam twice. Now, some of the Acharonim have difficulty with this drasha. We need two awarenesses, not two forgetfulnesses. So what do we learn out from v'nelam shtei poimim? But the Gemara says, "Miklav." From this we derive Shabboslo Yediyah B'Tchilu B'Sof Helim Ben Osayim, that he was aware at the beginning and aware at the end, and forgetful in the middle. So how do we know that if it says Nelam twice? So I think the pshat is like this. The pshat is Nelam twice implies the flip side of not knowing is knowing. So therefore, it was Nelam and then Nelam again. It must be between the two Nelams you had the idea, right? You had awareness. And of course, the final idea is what it requires you a carbon. So it must mean that there was an unawareness because nothing happened. Then there was an awareness. Then you forgot again, and that's when you entered the Beis Hamikdash or the Kachim, and then you became aware again. That's the catalyst for you bringing carbon. So it's really two idios, v'helim bein asayim. Yes, of course, there's a helim prior to the first idea because there's nothing to know at that point. But it's two awarenesses and the awareness and forgetfulness in between those two. That's what generates the chiyuv carbon. Akadunk Rabbi Akiva. Now that makes sense, Rabbi Akiva. Now Rabbi Akiva, I misrepresented Rabbi Akiva's approach yesterday, which is not germane because we didn't spend much time on it, but I did in passing mention Rabbi Akiva incorrectly. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, the following machlokas. Rabbi Akiva, there are four variables really, actually three variables. There are three variables when you're dealing with no, there are four variables. When you're dealing with Tumas Mikdash for Kadoshav. One is whether it's Mikdash or Mikdash or Kodesh, right? We do either entering the base Mikdash or eating the carbon. The other is what you forgot. Did you forget that you were Tameh? Or did you forget that this was the base Hamikdash or that this was carbon? Right? So now, Rabbi Kiva holds that both by eating Kodesh and by eating Mikdash and by entering the base Hamikdash, you forgot you're only liable if you forget the what?
Yesterday you said.
Yeah, but I just said it was wrong. That was my mistake. So actually, it's no. He has to forget the tuma. Let me just check that out. Yes. Okay, the Rinbaz brings it down. In other words, you only liable carbon if you forget the tumah, not if you forget the kodesh and the mikdash. If you don't realize this is based on mikdash, or you don't realize this is kodesh, that doesn't generate a chiyuv of a carbon. What?
I thought that's what you said.
No, what I think I said yesterday is that you only chayiv on mikdash and not on kodesh. Only on entering the base. If I didn't say that, if I said it what you're saying, I said it correctly. Okay, so fine. I'm happy to have said it.
You joked about going to Orlando to the Holy Land.
Yeah, no. According to Rabbi Akiva, not liable in that case. According to Rabbi Shmuel, you are. According to Rabbi Akiva, you have to forget your tameh. In other words, two possibilities of forgetfulness. You either forgot your tameh, or you forgot that the Beis Hamikdash, right? Just like by Shabbos, two possibilities, right? Either you forget it's Shabbos or forget that this malacha is also, right? So Rabbi Akiva holds that here you must have forgotten the tumah, that you were tameh. That's what generates, that's called the idea. You knew you were tameh. You forgot you were tameh, and they remembered afterwards. But if you knew this is a Beis Hamikdash, forgot this is a Beis Hamikdash. Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. I did say it right. You knew it was a Beis Hamikdash, forgot it was a Beis Hamikdash, and then remembered afterwards it's a Beis Hamikdash. Then according to Rabbi Akiva, you're not liable to carbon. No, I didn't say it right. You're not liable to carbon in that case. Okay? It's only if you knew the tumah, forgot the tumah, remembered the tumah. Not if you knew Beis Hamikdash, forgot Beis Hamikdash, remembered Beis Hamikdash, or knew Kodesh, knew it was a carbon, forgot it was a carbon, and then remembered afterwards it was a carbon. So there, it has to be that the helim is on the tumah. Rabbi Shmuel holds no matter what you forget, you're still liable. Okay, whether you forgot the tumah or forgot the carbon in the middle, or the kodesh mikdash, doesn't matter. Okay, so that's what Mara says. Akaduk Rabbi Akiva. So, Rabbi Akiva, there's one word v'nelam extra. Why is it extra? Because there's only one type of nelam for it. There's only one type of helim when you forget the tumah, not when you forget the mikdash or the kodesh. So there's one word nelam superfluous to make the drasha in the idea b'tchila, idea b'sof, and Nehelim Benosain. They need awareness at the beginning, awareness at the end, and forgetfulness in the middle. However, Rabbi Shmuel, what are we going to say? Rabbi Shmuel needs both words V'nehelam in order to teach us that whether the problem is Tumas Mikdash, forgetting the Tumah or forgetting the Mikdash and the Kodesh, you're still liable. So it says the Gemara for a carbon. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, correct, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel is like Rabbi. The Rabbi says, V'nehelam imenu. It says, but Enochnami, the Nelam is not superfluous. But it says, V'nehelam imenu. It becomes forgotten from him, right? What does Mimenu teach us? That he knew at some point, and it became forgotten from him, right? Miklal Sheyodea means that he initially knew and then he forgot. So that's how we derive from the grammar, or rather from the inference of the pasuk, we derive that there need to have Tchiyadiyah B'tchila. Okay? Says the Gemara, V'yada. Says actually, besides element from which you do that he knew, also says V'yada, right? Also Harei Shtei Yadios. So V'nehelim imenu, the flip side, which is that he knows, and V'yada, which is actually people knowledge, that tells us that it has to have two awarenesses, before and after. It says Mar Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi. Okay, Rabbi Shmuel holds like Rabbi in that drasha. Rabbi Shmuel, there's Rabbi when he says that Shavuos, that Yediyas Satum are two which are four. Is that Dafka going like Rabbi Shmuel? Because according to Shmuel, you have two variables, Kodesh and Mikdash, as being what you're eating or entering, and also Tumah, forgetting the Tumah or forgetting that it's based on Mikdash or Kodesh. So it's Rabbi going like Rabbi Shmuel, Samar Nova, Filu Rabbi Akiva, so you can even go like Rabbi Akiva. What are the two which are for? Not two types of tumor pertain to two types of scenarios. Rather, the two types of components comparing to two different scenarios. How so? The two which are for are Mikdash and Kodesh. Those are the two. And the four components of that are awareness and forgetfulness. Okay? So those are the components in all those issues which we're talking about. So the two which are four, not four different cases, because there aren't four different cases which are chayav a korban according to Akiva. Because now Matami, where you forgot about the Kodesh Mikdash, you only forgot about the Tumah. But nevertheless, you can have two which are four in terms of the components of the case. With the two cases of Kodesh and Mikdash, the components are Yediyah and Helim, and those are the four things, not four separate cases, but four aspects, two per case. Okay? So says the Gemara, Vista boy Dishmina Minada. There are those who wanted to learn out from here. Vuyada Minhacha from here. It says he knew and he was guilty. Paulo Kvar Ne'emar, Ray says Vutamei Vashem. It's all in the parsha of this Tumas Mikdash Tumas Kodasha. And if it's not in order to teach us Yediyah ahead of time, if it's not in order to teach us Yediyah ahead of time, tell yourself teach us so you have to know afterwards, which of course is difficult. The Gemara is immediately going to ask on that. Of course you have to know at the end. Otherwise it can't be a korban. You don't need a puzzle to tell us you became aware after the Avera. That's the by definition requires being a korban. So Rabbi Abun asked this exact question. He said, "If you don't know dalo basov, hech maybe a korban. You don't become aware of that you sin, how being a korban. You don't need a puzzle to tell us that he had the idea at the end. Without the idea, he had that awareness of what he did. He's never been a korban, right? So therefore, what he meant to say is that if you don't need a puzzle to teach us that it becomes aware at the end, because that's pashut, because you can't be a korban unless you become aware that you're liable to a korban, right? So so that's do then with awareness at the beginning. Okay? In other words, from this pasuk they learn out that it says v'yadav Hashem. So from that we derive that there's an extra yediyah. What's the extra yediyah? The extra yediyah is prior to actually having committed the Tumas Mikdash or Tumas Kodosha. Hey, see, when they ask the question like this, Harei Ksiv, doesn't it say, Oh, Da'alav Chataso, if he becomes aware of his sin, Vehevi, he brings any korban, generic korban, it's not necessarily our korban, right? Volaviori. So if that's the case, if it's used the language over there, oh, Da'alav, right? Me'atim eno ino li'adias, should be adias sof. If it's not necessary for the awareness at the end, it's an alien li'adias tchila. Shat tells us that any korban you bring, for any of it has to be one you knew there was also forgot, and then did it anyway, and then remembered, right? Because can't be the awareness at the end only because it's partial that then you're liable. That you need to have awareness at the end because otherwise carrying a korban. And that's going awareness at the beginning. So it says they said no. They said the only time that one second. What do we do with Odayla? I'm sorry, I stopped in the middle of a sentence. That's being at the korban. This talking about that which it says. It's talking about that when you become aware of whatever sin you committed, even if it's after Yom Kippur, you still have to bring the korban. If you definitely committed a sin, you have to bring the korban, even if Yom Kippur passed over you. Yom Kippur's kapara does not deprive you of the requirement to bring a korban. How we know that? From the pasuk of Odayla B'chata. So it's not talking about some transposing the idea of Yediyah B'tchila with initial awareness from our Gemara. Rather, it has to do with Odayla B'chata means and there's no statute of limitations. Whenever you become aware that you committed a sin, even after Yom Kippur, even after several Yom Kippurs, you still have to bring a korban.
Well, that's what the Mishnah said.
Right. So we learned that. So we learn out of the pasuk of Hodai Love Chataso. That doesn't have to do with your knowledge of the prohibition. Rather, when you become aware, whenever you become aware of the what you committed. So it's that.
I don't understand the whole. Why are they discussing about why the word Hodah is there? There has to be Hodah. If there is no Hodah at the beginning.
No, that's the beginning. No, you don't. No, that's the whole point. We don't need to tell the pasuk doesn't have to tell us that Hodah to be at the end. It's partial. If you don't know at the end, you're not bringing a korban, right?
Why is it question in the beginning too?
No, but if that's only by we're saying it's only by korban olaviyoret like that. By any other korban in the Torah, you don't need idea betchila. You don't need to know this is chazer before you eat before you ate it in order to bring a korban. Even if you found out afterwards, you still have to eat chazer. That's what is our problem here, because our problem is that which is an extra puzzle, seems to indicate that you have to know every aver before you commit it. But we know that that's not true. We know that only by korban olaviyoret you have to know beforehand that you're about to transgress an aver. So that's how you're supposed to tell us that anybody who's chayav a korban has to be in that korban even after Yom Kippur. Okay. So it says, it's only if you're chayav a definite korban. Or if you're chayav an Asham Toli, so Asham Toli, which is brought when you're Mesuppak, if you commit an Aver or not, that, if Yom Kippur passed over, you don't have to bring. Okay? So that's the part, how do we tell Talmud Lomar? Again, how do we know if you definitely found out you commit Aver after Yom Kippur, you must bring that definite korban? Because it says top of Dalit, or Amid Aleph, it also says the Torah besides the top of Dalit, Amid Aleph. Or it doesn't but when he becomes aware of his definite sin, when he becomes aware of it, he brings Aflach Yom Kippur. Even after Yom Kippur. Now the thing is, you really don't have Chumashim here. it says there, you know what, why don't you read straight for me, Mr. Zucker, read for me the first 5 psukim in English.
And if a person sins and hears the command that he takes an oath, and is a witness having seen or known something, so that he has not testified until there is iniquity. If a person touches some unclean object, be it the carcass of an unclean animal, or the carcass of unclean livestock, or the carcass of unclean small creature, and escapes his notice, but it is unclean and therefore guilty. Or if he touches the uncleanness of a being, whatever the unclean state of that, by which he has become uncleanness, and escapes his notice, but he has discovered it and therefore cursed, guilt. Or if a person swears, uttering it with his lips, or to deny or to grant something with special, with regard to anything that a man may utter in an oath, and has escaped his notice, and he has now discovered it, and he incurs guilt to God with final something.
Yeah.
Then it shall be that if he incurs guilt regarding one of these, he shall acknowledge to himself that regarding which he has sinned.
Okay, that's a stinky translation.
It's a terrible truth.
It's a terrible translation.
The Hertz isn't any better.
It's no better? It's a terrible translation.
This is her.
No, that's Hirsch. Yes, Hirsch.
That's what
So in any event, it's a terrible translation. But the point is that in those 5 psukim, it doesn't say anything about eating kodesh or entering the Beis HaMikdash, right? And this is the point of this is talking about korban olav yored. So how do we know that's talking about entering the Beis HaMikdash or tumas or being or eating a korban, right? Keep chumashim open. So it says more. How do we know? The statement in the pasuk, right? Don't say nothing in the pasuk, right? So it says more. It's a logic. Later on, it says that in Vayikra it says they should not defile my Beis HaMikdash and my kochim, right? And there, that's the warning. Here it says bring a korban. I'm trying to do a tumah. So logic dictates that whatever the prohibition is over there is mistama what the discussion is over here. Okay, so it's just the logic. Ma'onesh of fourth line down. Ma'onesh v'azara mula, just like the punishment and the prohibition mentioned later on. But tumas b'tosh shlosh, it's talking about where you're metame the Beis HaMikdash or korbanos. Actually, of korban. So when you're live with the korban, it's on tumas b'tosh shlosh on the two of the Beis HaMikdash or korbanos. Another now says more another pshar. Lesman Yaakov mitok. Well, actually, it's a question. Lesman Yaakov asks mitok shneimar lo achalti b'nei mimenu. It says when you come and bring up your meiser shein Yerushalmi, you have to say I did not eat it when I was in aninus, when I was in avelus. So that's the case. Yochel Yisrael she'ocha meiser oinen. What if Yisrael ate meiser shein when he was in oinen, right? Or Tomei, or when he was Tomei, Yavi, maybe korban, maybe Shmei and korban as well. Maybe that's included in the Tumah, which is mentioned in the first 5 psukim, which we read a few moments ago. Talmud loy mal me'ela, that's why it says in these psukim, me'ela, from these. Yesh me'ela chayv, yesh me'ela potter. There are certain types of Tumah which are liable, certain types of Tumah which are not liable on. He says, well, if that's the case, if there's certain times that you are, certain times you're not. Let me preclude if Yisrael ate Meiser Sheni when he was Tomei, because it's not a capital crime. But below Tzisat Truma, maybe if Yisrael eats Truma when he's Tomei, even a Kohen eats Truma when he's Tomei, Shuavo Misa, and it's the capital crime, God smites you down dead. You shall die because you defiled it. Maybe if you did it inadvertently, bring the korban of the Yered. That's why Talmud says Anachabal a second time in these psukim me'ela. It says it actually twice. From these, yesh me'ela chayav, yesh me'ela potter. At some you're liable, at some you're exempt. Says the Gemara. Malahalon truma af kan truma. Still, maybe, okay, so maybe at korbanos you're exempt. Maybe at truma you're liable, right? Who says it's korbanos which you bring the carbon oil of Yarei for eating karbanos when you're tamei. Maybe it's for eating truma dafka when you're tamei. So that's more to logic. Didn't you learn all chayavi karbanos are learned out from the paradigm of avodah zarah? Has been a chait similar to the chait of avodah zarah in terms of its penalty in order to bring karbanos. Says more of avodah zarah lamda kavera shabateira. Avodah zarah teaches about all other avodah Torah. Loimar or teach you ma avodah zarah miuchenes avodah zarah is unique. Shechayovin I was doing a kois. If you commit avodah zarah intentionally, you get smitten down with the punishment of excision, right? So bashigos chatos. You do unintentionally bring a chatos. Yotzto truma compared to avodah zarah is a minor crime. God only smites you down dead. He does not excise you. So therefore, karbanos are brought only on issues where the penalty is excision and above, not where the penalty is a mere death at the hands of heaven. So too by carbon olive yored, we say the same thing. Okay? That's what it says. It's only death. Says Gemara, I'm Rabbi Chanina Kumer Raimara. Rabbi Chanina said for Raimara. You want to learn from avodah zarah? If that's the case, for you that's learn from avodah zarah as well. They show you need awareness after the fact. Like avodah zarah, if you worship avodah zarah inadvertently, not knowing that this is prohibited, later on finding out, doesn't matter, you're still liable to a korban. You don't need idea b'tchila, initial awareness prior to the forgetfulness in order to be liable. So I would say by korban olive yored, you do ma chomis, meimar, betumas no, it's good. So chodavar midiach, so you need one awareness. So says the Gemara, Armalos said avodah zarah b'kavua. No. Avodah zarah, the paradigm of avodah zarah specifically relates to chatos, and chatos is different than carbon oil of yored because chatos there's no sliding scale. So every chatos has definitely has lesser catalyst for its obligation than carbon oil of yored. In fact, you only need the basoif, not the betchila. So that's what it says. Avodah zarah. Avodah zarah b'kavua. It's a standard carbon to us mean it's kosher. But oil of yored, it's carbon which fluctuates up and down. You don't learn a set carbon from one which fluctuates. Oil of yored, no one which fluctuates. B'kavua from b'chamua. Hey, if that's the case, though, wait a second. So who says you just said carbon oil of yored is not a truma because carbonates are only brought. Chatas only brought where the penalty is excision. Now it's a mere death. Yes, but maybe that's only true about a chatos. I know it's true about a carbon oil of yored. Maybe just like it has the leniency of a sliding scale, maybe it also has the leniency that we brought even if you eat truma betuma. Right? So says the Gemara. No, I can get out of that. Nemakah make a Yerushalmi. It says here behemot tmeah. It says by the carbon oil of yored behemot tmeah. And Nemer Lahalon, and it says also later on in Vayikra Zayin, that's talking about actually eating karbanos when you're tamei, what punishment you get. That's where it mentions the excision. So there it says over there, Behemot Tmei as well. Ma'abei Tmei Mur Lahalon, just like the Behemot Tmei I mentioned in Vayikra Zayin, Ba'am B'tumas HaKodesh. It's where it has a tumah which pertains to eating called banais. Abei matmei murakad. So to abei matmei which is mentioned here, but tumah sakodesh has to do with the problem with eating called banais, not eating anything less such as truma. Eliel tumas hekdesh. Only know this is true about the tumah of hekdesh. Tumas of the meaning karbanos. Tumas mikdash. I don't know it's true also about anything based on mikdash related to tamei. Ta'amuloimer, because it's talking about its cute svara. It says v'tumaso olav. Your tumas upon you. If tumas upon you, what does it mean v'tumaso olav? So it says the Gemara. It's machamis meimar. What did you see from that pasuk? So it says b'tamesh acha tahar. It's talking about a tamei who ate tar, or b'tar shachal tamei. We don't know. What's the pasuk about? Is it pasuk talking about? Oops. Oh well. Is it talking about a person who's so about a person who's tamei who ate a korban which was tar, or a person who's tar who ate a korban which is tamei. Which are we talking about in this pasuk? So actually we're asking two questions. We're asking how we know it's talking about tumas mikdash, and we're also asking how we know it's talking about where you were tamei and you ate the thing which is tar. So the Gemara actually kills these two birds with one stone. Tumasol love. An interesting drush the Gemara makes. Before I read inside, tumasol love means the tumah is upon you. Tumah upon you means it's extrinsic to you. You can get it off. When can you get it off? How can you get tumah off of you? We're going to mikvah, pour aduma, right? So tumah sa'ala means the tumah is upon you. There's a way to remove it. The animal itself, once it becomes tummy because it's a carcass, or it's not. Once it's slaughtered, there's no way of making it tahor. You can't take a carcass to the mikveh, right? So therefore, the pasuk which says tumasoa love, it's not going on the animal. It's not a removable tumah if it's on the animal. Rather, tumah is on the individual. If the tumah is on the individual, it's no different. Then it makes no difference whether he's entering the Beis Hamikdash or eating a korban. Those are equivalent crimes, right? If it said that the animal is tamei, then it specifically would pertain to eating an animal which is tamei, a korban which became tamei, because the Beis Hamikdash itself can't become tamei. Obviously, it's sticks and stones, cemented to the ground. But if we're talking about the person is tamei, then it would pertain equally to whether he ate kodesh or entered the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so that says Machav Yisrael Tamei Shalchal Sator. It's about a tamei who ate tahor, but Torah Shalchal Tamei. The pasuk says v'tumas Allah, v'tumas haguf lo v'tumas basar. It's tumah of his body and not tumah of his of the flesh which he's eating.
So Rabbi Kiva doesn't can't learn this.
Why?
Because
no, that's the nature of the tumah, but that's not the nature of the helim. Where there are machlokes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel is what you forget, not the nature of the tumah itself. Okay. Rebbe says a different prat. Rebbe says that we have a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Zayin, which talks about over there about achila, about eating, and tumaso olav, and tuma is upon him. And he doesn't. You use that pasuk tumaso. Actually, I didn't make this clear, but and I'm not going to make you read the chumash. But then Vayikra Chav Beis is a play of the two ways. It says tumaso olav, not in Vayikra Hey. This pasuk doesn't say it's tumas upon him. It says in Vayikra Perek Beis and Vayikra Perek Zayin. And Vayikra Chav Beis it's talking about drawing nigh. Why don't you read to us? Vayikra 22:3. Chav Beis Gimel. Whoever gets there first can read their translation. 22:3. Chav Beis Gimel.
Translated the German was the one that made a mistake. Okay. 22:3.
Yes.
All right.
say unto them, whosoever ye should be of all your seed throughout your generations that approaches unto the holy days, which the children of Israel hallow unto the Lord. Bring his uncleanness upon him.
It's upon him. Okay, to my soul, love.
That soul shall be cut off from before me. I am the Lord.
Okay, so it doesn't say there anything about eating, right? It just says coming, drawing nigh. What language is used there? What's your problem? You're in the wrong place. This is 22. In Vayikra. Vayikra. Yeah.
That approaches unto the holy things.
Yes, that approaches unto the holy things. So approaching unto the holy things is not eating. So the first Tana uses that pasuk. Rebbe uses the pasuk in Vayikra Zayin Chav Chav Aleph. Right in Sharitas that pasuk. Vayikra 7, 20, 21. Yeah. Now look at Vayikra 7, 20. Nachmos? Vayikra 7:20. said, Nashmos. It says they're also uncleanness upon him. That's what it was. Yeah, go on.
And when anyone shall touch any unclean thing, whether it be the uncleanness of man or the uncleanness of beast, or any unclean desirable thing, and eat of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings that pertain unto the Lord, that soul shall be covered.
Okay, for two things. First of all, in that second pasuk you read, which is verse 21, it says Behemoth Mea, unclean beast or something like that, right? So that's Xer Shavat to Vayikra Hey of unclean beasts, and just like over here it's a Chiv Koris, so over there it's a Chiv Koris. But the other thing is, it says to Masolov in both psukim, his uncleanness is upon him in Vayikra 22, and here in Vayikra 7, right? So with the Tanakh Darshan Vayikra 22, Rebbe didn't want to use that to Masolov. This, he said, because that we already used that pasuk to teach us about Tumas Mikdash. Okay, they're talking about Tumas Mikdash, not just Tumas Kodesh. So he wants to say that he wants to use the pasuk of Vayikra Zion, where it also says Tumas Olav, to teach us that. Oh, wait a second, 1 second. I made a mistake. I made a big boo-boo. Actually, not a big boo-boo, minor boo-boo. The Tumas Olav in Vayikra Chav Beis, which we use in order to learn Tumas Mikdash, is not because, I explained it before incorrectly. The way it's learned out over there, Vayikra 22, is to teach us that it's also in the Beis Mikdash because of Gzeir Shava. It says Tumas Olav here, in Vayikra Chav Beis, in the Parshas Chukas in Bamidbar. It says Tumas Olav explicitly in the context of entering the Beis HaMikdash Tamei. So that's how we learn that entering the Beis HaMikdash Tamei regenerates a Chiyuv Korban. Because they say Vayikra Hey and Vayikra 22 are the same subject matter. And Vayikra 22 is linked to Parshas Chukas, where it also talks about Tumas Olav, and it says entering the Beis HaMikdash. Now, so that's how we know that Nichlas HaMikdash Tamei is one of the cases you bring Korbanos, not just if you ate Kodesh when you're Tamei. Now, since Rabbi says, since that pasuk of Tumas Olav is already used to make the Gzeir Shava between Tumas Kodesh, eating the carbon when you're Tamei, and Tumas Mikdash, entering the Beis HaMikdash Tamei, so therefore I need another Tumas Olav to teach us that it's when the individual who's Tamei ate Korbanos, because it's Tumah which can come off, it is Tumah which can come off, as opposed to the carbon itself being Tamei. He says, that I learn out from Vayikra Zion, where it talks about Achila, it talks about eating. Because in Vayikra Zion, supposed to Vayikra 22, it does talk about eating, and there it says Tumas Olav, so Tumas upon him and not upon the flesh. Okay? So as he says here, let me just go back again and read it over again because I messed it up before. So, Eliel Tumas Hektish. Tumas Hektish. You see it? You see it in the corner? Eliel Tumas Hektish. Eliel Tumas Hektish. Eliel Tumas Hektish, Ellie? Yeah, look at mine. Eliel Tumas Hektish. That is one of my better rhymes. Eliel Tumas Hektish. Alhidel Tumas Hektish. The Tumah, the carbon itself. Tumas Mikdash Minayin, and when Tumas Mikdash Tam Lord Tumas Olav, it says Tumas Olav in Vayikra 22, and that we link to Parshas Chukas, where it talks about entering the Beis HaMikdash. Machav Ismeimar. Now, new question. I forgot to make the interruption here. I went and read on Tam Lord Tumas Olav, and then went on to Machav Ismeimar. It's not a continuation, it's a new question. Tumas Olav means a Gzeir Shava. Now we ask Machav Ismeimar, what do you want to say? B'tamei Shachar B'atar, or B'tar Shachar Tamei, is he Tamei eating a carbon tar, or is he Tar eating a carbon Tamei? Tam Lomer Tumas Olav, that says his Tumas upon him, but Tumas Aguf, Lo Tumas Basar. He's the one who's Tamei, and the meat is not what's Tamei. That's using Vaikra Chapes for an additional drasha. Rabbi Yomer, don't use Vaikra Chapes for that. Rather use the Basar Torah about V'achal, about eating, and to Masal Love, which is Vaikra Zayin, Vaikra 7. Okay? But to Saguf Love, but to Mas Basar. It's where you're tummy, not where the meat is tummy. Rabbi Chia Marachia says, Never Kachim L'Shem Rabim, V'Nemar Tuma L'Shem Yachim. Now, that's an interesting thing what he's saying here. He says that Tuma is mentioned in the pasuk in singular, right? Tuma so a love, right? Where Tuma L'Shem Yachim, where it's Kachar mentioned to in plural. Right, Zevach Shlomim. Right, Shlomim is plural. A love is singular. So since that's the case, he wants to say, Hamanim kaim to maso a love, but to mas aguf a love, to mas basar. Actually, me matter. You can remove from him. Yotza basar shein to a person who can't come off the meat. Right. That's how I explained it before. Rabbi Chi explains it differently. He says, to Masola must be going upon him, not upon the animal, because the animal is mentioned in plural, Zevach Shlamim. If we were talking about tummy animals, it should say, to Maso Alehem, right? The tuma's on them. When it says to Masola of singular, it's actually not going on the animal, but going on the individual. Okay? So it says the Gemara, new issue. In came Ma'il Yom Kippur, you go Yom Kippur. What does Yom Kippur help? If after Yom Kippur you have to bring in Korbanos anyway. You have to bring in, the commission said, if you find after Yom Kippur, you still have to bring in Korbanos. So what does Yom Kippur do for you? Rabbi Yisrael Buna, it says, Nasi Yom Kippur Ka'asham Toli. Yom Kippur then has the status of Asham Toli. Just like Asham Toli is a stopgap measure to find before you found out if you actually committed that Avera or not, it atones for you. And so too, May sleep Yom Kippurim. If you die for Yom Kippur, but you haven't achieved any kapara whatsoever. After Yom Kippurim, after Yom Kippur, for our kippur, it would not be achieved total kapara, but it's like an Asham Toli. If you die after an Asham Toli, you got some of your kapara, so it's Yom Kippur gives you some of your kapara. Full kapara, however, is not achieved if you found out sin unless you bring the actual korban. Okay? Says the Gemara further, it says that the korban brought on Yom Kippur, the soyer nasa bifnim, atones for the impurity of Bnei Yisrael. Yeshi binyan zeh shalosh temeos. I have three possible tumas to talk about. What tumah are you talking about? I have the existential tumas. What's an existential tumah? Tumas avodah zarah. Avodah zarah is called tumah. That's a reference to avodah zarah. Gili Arayis. Arayis is a licentious is also called Tuma. Shemai says, Vildi Asos Michukos, Atoivos, not to the repugnant things, and it says there, Tuma above the Goyim who live there. Shvichus Domin. Murder is called Tuma. Shemai Lo to Tamus Oretz. Right? So, Avodah Zarah, Gili Arayis, Shvichus Domin, the big three are all called Tuma. Maybe on Yom Kippur, the Soyer Nas Miftim is Mechaper on that, right? And that makes sense, because these are the big three. What else you want Yom Kippur to be Mechaper on? Says no. Yola called Tumaso Soyers and Mechaper. Does the goat made inside the Kodesh Kadoshim and Kippur atone for that inside the Kodesh? Tablam it says meat tumos for low cold tumos. Only atones for some. It says Prepare Kodesh mitum os b'nei Yisrael from some of them. Where you find the Pasuk draw a distinction betumas mikdash v'kadashav in the tuma of mikdash and kadashav. Now in tumas mikdash kadashav it says me'ela from these. So that's in Vayikra. Hey, so to here it says mitumos, right? So therefore, just like it says me'ela by tumas mikdash kadashav. So too it's the mitumos, which it says by the Korban Yom Kippur, we will only draw means draw the distinction, but it means we'll only say that this Korban oil of that Yom Kippur, the soyer nasa bifnim works for tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Divi Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's drasha that equates the me'ela by tumas mikdash kadashav to the mitumos, which is said by Yom Kippur. Rabbi Shimon says you don't have to go that far. Rabbi Shimon says, on the page, inherently you can prove this from the korban itself, which is burning on Kippur. Shenamar says, "V'chipur hakodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael." V'shteit, what did it say? Atone for the kodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael. Doesn't say atone for Avodah historically Rashi Fichus Dam. It says atone for kodesh. That's what the Sorah Nasrivdim does, right? Yochol al tumas mikdash kadosh of soilcha kol tuma shabbat kodesh. Tuma which is inside the kodesh. Meaning on mikdash kadoshim, not on any existential type of tumah, but on true tumah. Mikdash kadoshim soyer zem yechaper. So says the Gemara, is it on does it atone for? Does it atone for tumas mikdash v'kadoshav, which you could yourself bring a korban for? But Yom Kippur Sorah Nasrivdim is atone for one for which yourself bring a korban, which means Yediyah b'tchila, Helim b'emtza, Yediyah b'sof. Does it atone for those two? No. Talmud says this pasuk atones for me pishayim. This tone of tones for pesha. What does pesha mean? A criminal act. A criminal act. Elum is elum moedim, a rebellious act. It's amazing. This korban atones for mazid. Now, Gemara says, what does mazid mean? Not necessarily mazid itself, but anything which a korban doesn't work for. So this Sorah Nasrivdim and Yom Kippur, the goat made inside the base, inside the kodesh and Yom Kippur, atones for things for which you otherwise would not be able to bring korbanos. So anything which you otherwise could bring a korban for, which is the class in which you bring a korban olav yari, where there's Yediyah b'tchila, Helim emtzi, Yediyah b'sof, Yom Kippur's korban is not mechaper for. Yom Kippur's korban is only mechaper for cases such as where there's Yediyah b'tchila v'lo b'sof, or Yediyah b'sof v'lo b'tchila, where you can't bring another korban. There Yom Kippur is mechaper. Okay? Again, things for which, just like a passion sign for which a korban can't be mechaper, so to the tumas mikdash kodesh, for which this mechaper is something for which there is no other korban to be brought. Right? That's how I know that rebellion is the language of Pesha. Okay?
Now, the Gemara could have brought the reason why the big three is not mechaper with Yom Kippur is because it's the Ehar and the Yavo. So those are the only.
Yeah, but we want to learn that not from logic. We want to learn purely from Silkin. No, let's go down Marv here. Okay. Now, a case where, till now we talk about Sorah Nasrivdim atoning for the, where you knew at the end, the new at the beginning, not at the end. In other words, you never found out. Right? So therefore, the Sorah Nasrivdim is mechaper. What about the opposite case? You found out. You didn't know at the beginning. So you can't make korban olav yored, and that might Sorah Nas b'chutz Yom Kippur mechaper. The goat which is done outside the kodesh, in the courtyard of the base of Mikdash, and Yom Kippur itself is mechaper. Shem it says milvad chatas hakippurim. Besides the chatas hakippurim, you do this. Chatas hakippurim is the Sorah Nas b'ifnim. So what does milvad mean? Amash zeh mechaper, zeh mechaper. It atones for the same thing, but whatever the first thing left. Meaning the first thing the first korban Sorah Nasrivdim does tumas mikdash v'kadoshav, where you knew before but not after. This atones for the rest of it, meaning where you knew after but not before, right? Ein mechaper el adav sheish bo yediyah. Ma'apnim, which didn't want to ein mechaper el adav sheish bo yediyah, told only where there was some awareness, either before or after. Al chitzel mechaper el adav sheish bo yediyah also told only something where there's some awareness, either before or after. What atones for where there's no awareness whatsoever? That'll be the next Mishnah. What do you want to say? What do you see to say actually? Is the outer one, does the outer korban, the inner korban, does it leave you dangling? Because we said you leaves you dangling until you find out after Yom Kippur. Because there was Yediyah b'tchila, there's no Yediyah b'soif. So if you ever get Yediyah b'soif, then you have to bring a real korban. Yom Kippur's only totally leaves you dangling to see if you'll find out, right? So what do we say about the outer korban? We say achitza mechaper, the outer korban atones all together. Or achitza toilav apnim mechaper. Do we say vice versa? The outer one is total, leaves you dangling. V'avdim mechaper, and the inner one is mechaper. Ozev zayitlu, maybe both of them leave you dangling, right? Ozev zayichaper, both of them atone. Now it's hard. I'm not sure exactly what this is going to leave you dangling for. I guess till you do more tshuva. In other words, it's mechaper, but it's not mechaper completely. So Mike Kadum, what's the status? Rabbi Yaakov Bar said, Milas Chamas. I saw something about this, but I don't understand it. What I saw, Rish Lakish Usiv Kram Yirkum Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish asked this question from Rabbi Yochanan. What's the status after Yom Kippur for this guy? V'asiv Le Michluki Bas Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan answered him from Chiluki Kaparos. So that's what we're talking about. Velenia the Marley, but I don't know I don't understand what he said. He said maybe this is what you saw, and this is how to understand it. Now the next 3 lines are a mistake. Nobody says it except me, but it's clear that they're the same lines which appear in Amud Aleph in the different context. And it seems to be quite clear that the Sofer wrote the Yerushalmi over and made a mistake. You saw the words Ma Chomis on Amud Aleph because they appear there, and you saw these words over here Ma Chomis on the base, and then by inadvertently he copied the next 2 lines, which are totally irrelevant here, and they're redundant. They appeared already in Amud Aleph. So let's skip to 2 dots. So this is where the question is. Question Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, same question we asked already beginning more. Do they both atone, or do they both leave you dangling? Does one atone and one leave you dangling? Ma'ikadon, what is the answer? The response is, which Rabbi Yochanan responded, he responded like this, it says, this is the Chiluki Kapora. Chiluki Kapora are the different gradations of sin. What are the different gradations of sin? When you do the shiur la'azazel, which is the main kapara in Yom Kippur. The main kapara for the main body of averos committed by Klal Yisrael is the shiur la'azazel. So what do you confess to shiur la'azazel? Is v'adalav avonos. Avonos elus donos. Those are the intentional sins. Shoyim elim rodim. Those are even worse. Those are rebellious sins. Chatos elu shkogos. Those are inadvertent sins. Nasa, and the animal carries these sins. Yechaper means it atones for these sins. Okay, so what does that teach us? Rabbi Yam, Rabbi Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yasin, and Rish Lakish. We obviously learned this from Rabbi Yochanan. The shiur la'azazel carries upon it as kol avonosam all their averos. Tafas, but it says avonosam. Mentions specifically avonos. Tafas has donos. It mentions the intentional sins. V'nei shkogos, and doesn't think about the unintentional ones. Why? Lo mareh to teach you. Mazdoino she'em be'em chiyuv korban. You know what the shiur la'azazel is mechaber for? For stuff for which you can't become chayav a korban. But stuff for which you become chayav a korban, it's always totally. What does totally mean? Maybe someday you'll be liable for the korban. Just like the shiur is also mechaber for avonos, intentional sins for which you can never be a korban. So to be mechaber other types of sins for which you can never be a korban. But it's not going to be mechaper in a sin completely, at least, for which you might potentially someday be liable of korban. Okay? So they say, Avshkol Shem Mechi of korban. The lama bo lekan. So that's the case. What does it do? What does the korban, the shiur la'azazel do for those things which you might potentially be a korban? Rabbi B'Shem Riyah said, l'kliya. It suspends the problem, but it doesn't obliterate the problem. So we're going to learn from there. So says Mar. So wait a minute. So says Mar, v'yitle ochle shkatzim ramasim. If it's told on averos and shomer and korban, maybe it's told even on prohibitions which are lower than the ones which you usually bring a chatos. For example, eating a creepy crawly things. That's only a regular lav. It's not a chiyuv kares. Maybe the shiur la'azazel doesn't atone, atones also for stuff which you don't be a korban because they're lighter prohibitions. So Rabbi Zera said no, chatosam. It says that the shiur la'azazel appears for atones for chatos, right? So ma chatosam shenemar la'on sheish bo chiyuv korban. Just like chatos normally means something which is a chiyuv korban. Av chatosam shenemar kan. So here sheish bo chiyuv chatos, it's talking about chatos. Yotz as opposed to should be shkogos. Pnei Moshe changes. Shem and chiv kar as opposed to the lesser level of prohibition for which there would be no for which there is no chiv korban. That's not included in the kapara or even the kliya of the soil last also. By the way, the word b'mashma, the first line, cleaner Ephraim takes out. So the ma'aseh, well, you come out as all the korbanos Yom Kippur are toilah. Meaning that if there's ever a possibility of you ever bringing a korban, they don't atone. So even a case where the soyer nasa b'chutz, which atones for a case where you didn't know, you didn't have idea b'tchila, then you had a helem, then idea b'chutz. So the soyer nasa b'chutz is toilah for that. It means if you ever come to recognize that you did have idea b'tchila, maybe it's temporary amnesia, someday you realize it, and then there'll be a chi of korban. So Yom Kippur didn't obliterate that chi of korban. It always just a suspension. Perhaps someday you'll be liable to bring a korban. Okay, that's what it does. Says the Gemara. Now getting back to the end of the Mishnah, it says milvar chatasa kippurim. Right, I'm just going to finish the Mishnah and we'll stop. Milvar chatasa kippurim. What does milvar chatasa kippurim means? We explain. Shiur soya nasa bifnim. Whatever the soya nasa bifnim leaves over. The soya nasa bifnim atones for where there's the idea b'tchila, it's toilah actually. Where there's the idea b'tchila, halem, but no idea b'sof. So whatever that leaves over, the soya nasa b'chutz, it should say the soya nasa b'chutz and Yom Kippur are toilah, right? So it says the Gemara, mashi rasa, what does it leave over? It leaves over ein b'idea tchila v'yesh b'idea b'sof. The one on the inside is talking mechaper for, well, we said a korban olivia, it is mechaper in the case where it's idea b'tchila, helem, idea b'sof. The soya nasa b'fnim is mechaper on idea b'tchila and then helem. What does it leave over? It says bilvar chatas kippurim. Anything left over by that, the soya nasa b'chutz is mechaper for. That's a case where there is helem and idea b'sof. That goes on the soya nasa b'chutz. Okay, we'll have to stop here for today.